Dear students, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Manzur Ahmad Ganai, lecturer history. Our today's topic for 11th class students of history subject is write a careful account of how the world appeared different to 17th century Europeans. Dear students, in this question we have to explain how 17th century or in what ways 17th century looked different to the Europeans than the previous centuries, than the centuries before 17th century. Dear students, the world in the 17th century looked totally different to the Europeans from the previous centuries in following ways. Number one, by the end of the 17th century or in the 17th century itself, the Europe had entered into modern age and the age of rational thinking. Means that the medieval age, the medieval period, which existed in Europe from 5th to 15th century AD, had come to an end, and by the 17th century, Europe had entered the modern age in all its forms. Also, it was the time when there was rational thinking among the people, when people began to think on rational lines, on scientific lines, on the basis of logic and reason. And now the outdated ideology, outdated principles and thoughts had no belief, had no scope in life in the 17th century. Number two, 17th century was the age when old beliefs and traditional ideas of the world began to be challenged and questioned. Means that from 5th to 15th century AD, during the Middle Ages in Europe, the beliefs and ideologies and traditional thoughts which existed in the Europe during these 1000 years were now questioned, were now challenged in the 17th century. Means no one accepted the traditional and ancient beliefs on their face value, but all these beliefs were now questioned and challenged by people and accepted only by the people only after when these beliefs and traditional ideas came true or were beneficial for the people in the modern ages in the 17th century. Only these principles and ideas were accepted. And if these principles and ideas of medieval ages were not fruitful to people, were not beneficial for the people, then these were not accepted. And if these were not truth-based, then these are they rejected and thrown in the dustbin. Number three, the 17th century has often been called as the age of scientific revolution. It was in the 17th century that a number of inventions, discoveries and explorations took place in Europe, and the centuries before 17th century had not experienced such developments, such changes in the scientific field in the European history. Number four, all available ideas, all the ideas and beliefs that were prevailing in the medieval period had to pass through scientific and rational test to be established as the truth. Dear students, in the 17th century or in the modern ages in Europe, the meaning of truth changed. Means that from the 5th to 15th century AD, when there were middle ages in Europe and there was a dominance of church. During this period, truth was considered to be only that thing which was preached by the church. Whatever principles, whatever rules, whatever teachings are preached by the church to the people, these all were to be considered truth. If anyone raised questions over the principles and teachings and rules of the church, then he was given heinous punishments, because whatever was preached by the church was considered to be the truth without any question by anybody. But now, after 17th century AD, truth was only that thing which would come true after seeing, after passing the scientific test, the rational test, the logical test, the test of reason and logic, means only thing that was fruitful to the humans, only thing that was this that which was supported by logic and reason, that was accepted as truth, not the ancient things which were considered by church as the truth and other things. Number 5, the new idea of truth created a world that was very different from the existing earlier. As I have told you in the previous point, that the new idea of truth means the truth based on the concept of logic and reason, truth based on the concept of scientific research and analysis. And this concept of truth, which was totally different from the earlier concept of truth, where the principles and rules of church were considered truth. But now the truth, the definition of truth which now changed, and in which logic and reason was considered to be the test to testify any belief, anything to be considered as a truth. And this new idea of truth create a world that was totally different from the existing earlier, where church had now no place, where principles and rules of church had no place, but only those rules and regulations had place which were true, which passed the test of logic, reason, and scientific research. Number 6, the 17th century Europeans began to look upon church as the agency of exploitation, deception, ignorance, corruption, dishonesty, means all bad attributes were associated with the church now. And church was considered to be the institution, that is church, which was considered to be the epitome of courage, or epitome of, we can say, respect and status in the society in the medieval period. The same institution in the 17th century was considered to be the institution of corruption, institution of exploitation, institution of dishonesty, and institution of all bad things. Thus we can say, after analyzing all these things, we can say by the 17th century Europe had taken a big step forward from ignorance towards the awareness, towards the awakening in the modern ages. So we can say the 17th century marked the beginning of modern ages in Europe, and the end of ignorance, end of this blind faiths, end of blind beliefs, end of irrational thinking, and the beginning of awareness, awakening, scientific research, technology, and analysis. Thank you.